James, I don't know if you know this, was on a plane once where, at 737, where one of the engines gave trouble. And the pilot said to everybody, we should be all right, but one of the engines has given up. And some people panicked. James happened to have his dog collar on, and someone said to him, Padre, do something religious. So he took up an offering. So welcome. We're going to do a series called Israel Then and Now. I said this morning, I'm not an expert on Israel. I think you've got to live somewhere for years to be an expert. But I am an expert on my experiences in Israel. So that's what I am going to share with you. We've stayed there twice for 2 months at the Garden Tomb in Jerusalem. And we're really going to share our experiences of that. Today, I'm simply going to try and give you a feel for what it's like to live in Jerusalem. And next week, we will actually follow the steps of Jesus in quite a meditative, devotional way, worship service kind of way. And the third week, I'm going to talk quite seriously about Israel's problems and what it means to pray for the peace of Jerusalem and give you a feel for some of the deeper things that are going on there. We're going to begin at Luton Airport because that's where we begin. A lot of people ask us, does it cost us to go to the Garden Tomb? The answer is from Luton Airport to Israel for 2 months and back costs us nothing. They pay that air flight and they give us accommodation on the site. And even at Luton Airport, you immediately sense something's different on this flight you're booking into, because there are a lot of people with long hair down the sides of their ears and with strange hats. Very young fathers with 4 or 5 children with their very young wives. The wives are dressed fairly ordinarily, although very conservatively, and their children are nicely dressed and nicely behaved and cheerful, and we can see they love their families. But part of the plan of the Hasidic Jews is to have lots of children so that they will build up a majority in Israel, and that's quite a controversial thing that I'll talk about later. But they go into the duty-free shop, and I saw one Hasidic father standing with his 4 children while his wife was choosing a scent, so quite normal in those ways. And then you catch the EasyJet 737, which is anything but easy, because EasyJet do not book you a seat. So what you do is you wait till the gate number is called, and then you run and try and get near the front of the queue, only to discover that old people, which they didn't qualify me as, and mothers with children, they get preference. And you take off for Israel. Interesting flight, because there are quite a lot of these Hasidic Jews on the plane, and they just take over. Walk all over the place and talk very Jewish style, you know. And then on the hour, all the men go to the front of the plane, closest facing Jerusalem, and they have their prayers there, all nodding in the front. I tell you, those guys must have very fit back and front. They don't just nod their heads, eh? It's from the waist, and it's quite energetic. And if they're at the front of the plane and they time it wrong, you know, I can just picture the poor pilot in the front trying to hold the joystick back because the plane's tipping forward. And then, of course, 5 hours later, you fly over the coast of Tel Aviv. And if you go down to Tel Aviv, it looks like nothing more than Durban. It's a modern city, looks just like Durban, except it faces west instead of facing east. So instead of sunrises, you get sunsets. There was this particular little statue thing, which was a surfboard with something upside down. I don't know, what does that look like to you? So I did a bit of Photoshop on it. There we are, and I reckon it looks like a monkey. What it's doing there, I haven't the faintest clue. Anyway, that was Tel Aviv. And then we head to Jerusalem, and we arrive at the Garden Tomb after sunset, and for the first time just get a glimpse in the moonlight of the tomb 100 meters from where our apartment is. And there we go to bed. Now the next morning, of course, you've got to get out into the town and start to see what's happening. The thing that immediately strikes you is how very different people look there than we used to. Almost everybody. No problem knowing, is that an Arab or a Jew? If you don't know that one, I can't help you. That's an Arab. I thought he looked really like the original Ali Baba with 40 thieves, you know, and if he'd caught me taking the picture, I really would have felt I might get a knife in my ribs. So very easy to tell Arab from Jew, isn't it? Arab or Jew? You know, and it's a piece of cake, but just fascinating faces and headdress and so on. Look at that wonderful face and the character of it. And you see the long curls down here that have never been cut. And you go to Israel with preconception that it's easy to tell Arab from Jew. It isn't. I'm going to show you now a series of pictures and ask you to tell me Arab or Jew. I've got some tourists in there just to trick you. So some of them aren't Arab or Jew. So Arab, Jew, or tourist. Try this one. Well, I'm hearing everything. And when I show you the whole picture, you will see amazingly he's an Orthodox Jew. Black. Only saw one of them. But there he was at the Western Wall praying with his typical Orthodox Jew. Answer is impossible to tell. He could be a secular Jew. They don't bother to wear yarmulkes. Impossible to tell until I show you who he's with, and then you can say, oh yes, that's an Arab. Very typical headdress for the woman to wear. I'll come back to that headdress just now. There are two. One of those is an Arab and one is a Jew. Impossible to tell until I remove and show you what they're wearing. The Arab will wear a head thing that covers most of his head. The Jew will wear more of a yarmulke. Only way you can tell. Don't think you can say that's a Jew because his skin's lighter. It doesn't work. There are plenty of Arabs lighter skinned than plenty of Jews. You're getting a feel for what it's like to be there? That's what I'm trying to do for you. Remember there were three categories, Arab, Jew, tourist. Well, the answer is she's a Jewish soldier. Believe it or not. Now, on our way through the airport, you can be given a tremendous grilling in Tel Aviv airport. And my passport picture is actually a very poor quality. I didn't even realize it was. I was stopped at passport control by a Jewish official woman, blonde hair, beautiful blue eyes. And she wouldn't let me through because she didn't think that my face matched. Then she held up the passport and gazed into my eyes. It was a wonderful, wonderful welcome to Israel. But Jewish. Again, impossible to tell until I show you what she's doing. She's reading her Hebrew prayer book, sitting well back in the Western Wall area, as far from the wall as you can get. But there she was doing her morning prayers. Could be Arab or Jew otherwise. Two boys. Impossible to tell until I show you the heads. One on the far side is Arab, the one on this side was Jewish. Are you getting the message? Don't think there's a prototype. And this has very great importance for looking 2 weeks' time at the Holocaust and the problem of race. There is no such thing as a Jewish race. And Hitler made in that a complete myth of his own. Arab, Jew, tourist. They're both tourists. That little boy is from Goodwood in the Cape. And he just happened to buy a yarmulke and put it on. That complicates it still further. That little boy is Swiss. This thing about race is not nearly as easy to define as we think. Arab, Jew, or tourist? I haven't shown you a tourist. Jewish, secular Jewish. Her father was a secular Jew, he told me. They just happened to come in on the Saturday afternoon. He had no yarmulke on, but Saturday's off. And he came in just to see what the garden tomb was about. And I got a chance to talk about Jesus' death and resurrection. Great privilege. 3 or 4 children. And that was one daughter. That was the other daughter. Well, you could say Jewish now, couldn't you? You're getting the message. It's very, very difficult to say. Now, I wanted to talk a bit about the Arab headdress. Many of the Arab women were dressed like that, where no hair must show. Very few burqas, by the way. Very few burqas in Israel. But lots and lots of women wear this headdress, which looks quite orthodox. But what is really quite strange is that not this one, but many have that headdress and then do up their face with makeup like this woman. Many times you will see this formal headdress, no hair, but excessive makeup. And not only excessive makeup, But as they walk past you, you discover they are wearing the tightest jeans they can get their backsides into. Now, I certainly didn't feel free to walk down the street and take a picture of that, so I had to go into a shop to just give you the idea. And I just wondered, what is this about? This formal headdress, what is it for? And yet they can have this way of attracting men with all they can get. Arab or Jew? Could never tell, but she's actually Jewish, and she is at the university on a Sunday. Quite an eerie feeling. You go to the university on a Sunday and it's all classes running. It's like a Monday to us. Quite a funny feeling, that. And then you get some people who really look Jewish, don't they? But of course they're tourists from New York. You see, that's our stereotype of what Jewish looks like. But most of them don't. But they looked so Jewish. I mean, their whole hand language and everything, just so Jewish. And the big nose. Our stereotype is taken from a narrow group of East European Jews, which is mostly what we have in South Africa, people of East European origin. So now the first little DVD I want to show you is I've put together pictures of faces in Jerusalem. Some you'll recognize as Jews, some you'll realize now are Arab, no tourists. And just to give you a feel, but I've put it to some quite sad Israeli music, because so many of these faces look sad or angry. Now, I suppose if you took a picture unaware on the bus, I probably don't look that great either. Nevertheless, I just wanted to contrast it with what I'll show you next week of faces in the garden of those who love and believe in Jesus. So maybe it's a bit unfair, but just to give you a last feeling of these faces and then on to something else. So I hope that gives you a picture of it's so different from being here. Now I want to move on to introduce you to the city of Jerusalem itself. It's quite a significant picture, and I'll show you a few things about it. But there's more to that picture than just the donkey and the man. And the donkey, by the way, on the very spot where Jesus rode the donkey into Jerusalem. But a closer up picture of that. The background behind him shows three of the most holy sites of three different religions in the world, all right on top of each other, two of them literally one on top of the other. Of course, the Dome of the Rock is the third most holy site in Islam. That is the spot at which Muhammad was reputed to be taken up to heaven, and will come back to that spot. Also is the spot on which the temple used to stand, exactly there, reputed to be the place where Abraham sacrificed Isaac. In the background, you see another big dome, a grey one. That is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and is the most holy site in certainly the Catholic world, the site supposed to be of Jesus' death and resurrection. And then tucked away between the two, right behind the Dome of the Rock, behind there is the Western Wall, the most holy site for Jews. All tucked together very, very close to one another. What you need to understand about Jerusalem, it's not like other ancient sites that are really museums now. This is a living city where people go to shop, and on a Friday afternoon or Friday morning, you get absolutely jammed in there with Arabs who've come into the old city to buy. Tourists are really a nuisance to them. Now there's a satellite picture of the greater Jerusalem. It is a modern city, and the old city of Jerusalem is actually a very small part of it. It's less than 1 kilometre from side to side. All this amazing history, and most of the stuff I'm going to talk to you about, it all took place in 1 square kilometre. I think it has to be the most worked over 1 square kilometre in the whole world. Now we stayed just to the north of the Damascus Gate in the Garden Tomb. Very convenient to the old city. And they have just in the last 2.5 years produced a lovely light railway, tram if you like, that travels from the northeast to the southwest of Jerusalem within a couple of 100 meters of where we stayed. And 2 years ago when we went, it was brand new, so we used it a great deal. But it runs right from the north to the south. Now in the south corner over there, its terminus is right next to Yad Vashem, the Holocaust memorial area, which we will go to 2 weeks tonight. And we went there many times. So that is the bigger city of Jerusalem. But we are going to focus almost all our attention for the rest of this evening on that 1 square kilometre. Not a big city at all, but of course in ancient times it was a big city. That shape you see there now is the wall of Sultan Solomon, built in the 15th century. It's fairly similar to the shape of the city in the time of Christ, quite a lot different from the city of David. On the east is the Kidron Valley and the Mount of Olives. And on the Mount of Olives is the view site, the famous view site, one of the most famous spots in the whole world. Gethsemane is just to the side on the Mount of Olives, and then opposite is the Temple Mount. Now this Temple Mount is very important. It was created by Herod just before the time of Christ. Now Solomon built his temple there. And to build his temple there, he leveled an area, obviously. It was an amazing piece of work, but that was what he did. But what he really left was a hill there and a valley here. What Herod did is he took the whole of that hill, cut it flat, and put it into the valley, and ended himself with an enormous flat area for his temple. To do that, built one of the great retaining walls of the ancient world. You can't imagine how big it is. There are 3 stones that are based about there in the middle. Engineers tell us are kind of the fulcrum of the whole thing and carry the whole weight of it, like the corner pieces. 3 stones that are about the size of a single-decker bus, and they weigh the equivalent of a fully loaded jumbo jet. Now just ask yourself, with none of our modern tools, how did they cut them? They not only cut them, it's all pointed, and then put them in place. It's a phenomenal, phenomenal piece of work. When Titus destroyed Jerusalem in AD 70, he gave orders exactly as Jesus had predicted. Not one stone will be left standing on another. Jesus referring to the temple, Herod's temple. That was literally obeyed by Titus's people. They destroyed the temple. They tried to destroy Herod's retaining wall, and they just gave up. It was so enormous that they've left it intact. That is all that is left of Herod's temple. Not the temple itself, but the retaining wall. Now, on that Temple Mount are now two buildings. One is the Dome of the Rock, the gold round building that is exactly where the original temple stood with the Holy of Holies, and also the Mosque of Omar that stands a little bit to the side. Now, the Jews believe that God's presence has never left the spot of the Holy of Holies, in spite of what's been done. And so the holiest place you can get is there. But no Jews are ever allowed up onto that Temple Mount. At least tourists are, but if they have a yarmulke on, they won't be allowed in. So they get to the closest place they can get. And where that is what is called the Western Wall. That yellow area I've got there is the Western Wall Plaza. It's a big area in front of the wall. The Western Wall is the retaining wall, all that's left of Herod's temple. On this last Feast of Tabernacles, we were there, but we didn't go that day. There were 100,000 Jews in that yellow area worshipping at the Western Wall. You can go any time of day you like, you will see people worshipping. Not all Orthodox Jews. This was an ordinary Jew, I guess. Do you see the little bits of paper stuck in between the bits of the wall? And you can even see some of the pointing of Herod's stones. Not only men, but women as well. That big plaza is divided into two sections, and only women can come on this side, and the upper area there is for men, because that's as close as you can get to where the Holy of Holies was. And the men are given that preference. But I found it very touching to see that woman praying intently at the Western Wall. And not only Jews will go to the Western Wall. As long as you wear a yarmulke, you're welcome to go. And no one asks any questions. Bear in mind that Jews can have blue eyes and blonde hair. And then a bit back, half a kilometre away, is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre with the grey dome that I showed you. Now, just outside the northern wall is a little hill that looks amazingly like a skull. And tucked around that in the time of Jesus, there was a vineyard, not a garden, a vineyard. And in the vineyard is a little cliff with a tomb cut into it, and that has become known as the Garden Tomb. And that's where we stayed, just north of the city, outside the Damascus Gate. Now, the city has got 8 gates, 7 of which you can use. There is the New Gate, the Damascus Gate, which is the one we used. There is the Herod's Gate, Stephen's Gate, the Golden Gate, which is famously bricked up, the Dung Gate, which is the main entrance to the Western Wall area, the Zion Gate, and the Jaffa Gate, which, like the Damascus Gate, is the other main entrance. So there are these 7 ways you can get in. One of them is closed. Inside the city, I want to just show you 3 churches that meant a lot to us. There are many churches, but Christ Church is the oldest Protestant church in Jerusalem, and is the one we went to quite often. And in a few minutes' time, you will see a little cut of an Ethiopian choir that was visiting and dancing. And then across the other side of the city is St. Anne's Church, a Catholic church, which is a bit of a relief after all the Greek Orthodox churches. It's an absolutely beautiful church, but with famous acoustics, so that you will see a clip in a moment of people singing. You will hear a woman singing Ave Maria, and you would swear there was a pipe organ playing. But it isn't. It's one man on a piano accordion. But he knew how to play very softly and just put it out onto the acoustics, and you think it's a pipe organ. and it's only one woman singing, you'll think it's a choir. And then I ended up with an Afrikaans group who'd been told you must sing and stop to listen to the echo. And they were singing the Lord's Prayer, and they sing "Vir ewig en ewig, Amen," very, very badly. But in spite of the bad singing, just listen to the echo and the acoustic of that beautiful church. And then our other favorite church was back on the Mount of Olives, a little church called Dominus Flevit, the Lord wept. Is what that means. Marking the spot where Jesus wept over Jerusalem. So those were our three favorite little churches. Not only is Jerusalem fascinating above ground, but you can travel almost from end to end underground if you want to. That is Hezekiah's tunnel, dug when Sennacherib was approaching, and he used it to divert the water from Gihon spring into the pool of Siloam. Inside David's city, they could withstand Sennacherib's siege, and that's what they managed to do. There's Wendy going through Hezekiah's tunnel, wading nearly waist deep. There's another tunnel that runs all the way from the western wall, steep downhill, also down to the pool of Siloam, and that's Herod's work, brand new when Jesus was there. There's about 1.5 kilometres underground. There's a picture of Wendy going through it. Bad picture because I took it from the video, but just to give you an idea of Herod's tunnel. And then there's a third tunnel which runs from the western wall all the way along the retaining wall underground. There's walking through that tunnel, and the stone on the right-hand side is the bus-sized stone, weighs the amount of a Boeing 747. That's on that side. That's the western wall. And then on top of all that, or underneath all that, is Solomon's Quarry, where you can go right in under the Arab quarter of the city to an artificial set of caves. There's a picture of them. That was dug by Solomon, later more by Herod, to get the beautiful limestone out of there for the temple. So it really is like a rabbit warren. There is no square kilometre in the world that has been worked over like this square kilometre. Underground, overground, everything you can think of. Then in the far northwest is a suburb called Mir Sharim. Means 1,000 gates. Mir Sharim is the home to most of the Hasidic Jews. Only a couple of 100 meters walk from the Garden Tomb. And that is where huge numbers of the Hasidic Jews live. Now we decided to walk into Mir Sharim. One's a little awkward doing that, but we did it. And we did it on the 8th day of the Feast of Tabernacles, which is a special Sabbath. Does anyone know what they celebrate on the last day of the Feast of Tabernacles? It's the end of the year's reading of the Torah and the start of another year of reading the Torah. It's the celebration of the Torah. And we were told if you walk into Mir Sharim that morning, and we were free, you will find them dancing with the Torah, with their beautiful scrolls they have. So we went in, and we did find that. One group dancing in the street, most of them we had to look through windows and felt a bit awkward. Wendy dressed very conservatively, and we did that. I did not take a camera with me because that is deeply offensive to them on a Sabbath, Shabbat as they would call it. So these pictures are taken off the internet. That one, by the way, is taken from New York. But just to show you their Sabbath best, their Homburg hats get replaced by these beautiful, exquisite fur hats, beautiful clothing, shoes. The children always exquisitely dressed. There they are again. Look at that beautiful children, how they dressed. Not many women in evidence there, but beautifully dressed little children. We did not see them in fancy dress. We just saw them in their Shabbat best. Now, that picture gives you just a little glimpse. See the ground behind them? Rubble, dirt, litter. Mir Sharim is filthy, covered in litter. And these people are dirt poor. They've got the Shabbat clothing that is magnificent, but they are dirt poor. There was an apple lying in the gutter. He actually stopped to pick up the apple and check it out and found it was really rotten, so he threw it down again. But that's the level of poverty. You see, these people are from childhood trained. Your whole life is governed by the synagogue. And there are many synagogues, and they don't all agree with each other. But the synagogue rules your life. It owns your property. It does your education. Girls get very little education. Boys get education in the Torah and the Talmud and the rabbinic writings, but nothing of practical value. So anyone who wants, and there are people trying to help people escape this ghetto, it's exceedingly difficult. They lose everything. And they're written off by their families, and they come out with nothing, and they've got no skills. It's a tremendous trap. And so there they are in this beautiful clothing in a real slum. It's very, very poor. Now, extremely conservative, that was one sign we read. To women and girls who pass through our neighborhood, we beg you with all our hearts, please do not pass through our neighborhood in immodest clothes. Modest clothes include closed blouse with long sleeved, long skirt, no trousers, no tight-fitting clothes. Please do not disturb the sanctity of our neighborhood and our way of life as Jews committed to, notice they won't write the word God, and his Torah. I don't have a problem with that sign. I think that's fine. It's courteous, and we tried to obey that when we went in. But plastered all over Mea Shearim were other signs, paper posters, bright orange and bright green. This only represents a splinter group, but there they are, plastered all over. In case you can't read that, I've reprinted some of it bigger. When men are in the street, women should go off to the side. Women should not be strolling outdoors when men are frequenting the streets. According to the halachic rule, the length of the dress must go down to at least midway between the knee and the heel. Women who wear clothing that is shorter than the din dictates are to be disgraced in public. This is in order that they should fall, lose all their merits, and not be saved in the war of Gog and Magog. It is written in the holy seraphim that women whose arms and legs are uncovered in this world will in Gehinnom be placed into a boiling pot of fire and burned. All over the place. And you get a picture of what it is to live under law. It's real. Only a splinter group, but very aggressive. And so they are around you. Don't take a picture of them. If they ever catch you pointing a camera at them, they're very aggressive, so you take them generally from behind. There they are on the buses. They love their children. The children seem happy, but they're in a prison. But I want to end tonight on a happier note. If you go down to the Western Wall area at the Dung Gate on a Tuesday or Thursday morning around 10 o'clock, you will find a very happy time. That is the time for the boys' bar mitzvahs. And one of the things we can learn from Jews, Orthodox and ordinary, is how to rejoice. We tend to be a stodgy lot. And we really can learn. Joy is a command in the Torah. We are commanded to rejoice. And this guy could sing and play his pipe, and he was actually a professional joy singer. And he would be hired, and he would take a group in. Next picture. And then you would see these little boys. Boy 13 is quite young, but from today he's a man. And he's treated like a man. He put them underneath canopies, and you see the one with the white cap, he's the 13-year-old, and all this dancing around him, and all the women and men clapping, and boy, they make them feel special. Something we can learn about child rearing and about how to rejoice. And there you see them with those incredibly precious, expensive scrolls. That one is not Orthodox because there's no long plaits down the side, but he has got strapped around the hand is a phylactery of the Deuteronomy passage and so on. Bind the law upon your hands. Bar mitzvah means son of the law. He's now becoming a man, a son of the law. And then they go right up to near the women's section and do their bar mitzvah where he reads from the Torah, and that is the moment he becomes a man. I thought that mother there looked a bit frightening to me, but there we go. I wouldn't argue with her too much, and they take pictures, and then when he's finished reading the Torah, they throw sweets like we would throw confetti, and it's celebrating, you are now a man, my son. And there is a boy, also not Orthodox. Notice he hasn't got the long growth down the side, but there's the phylactery on the forehead and on his arm as he is at that moment reading his reading from the Torah. Of course, they all have half-broken voices, so it's kind of fun to listen to them talking like this, you know. One of them, you heard about the boy who went into the shop and said, "Can I have a pint of milk and some butter, please?" And the man behind the counter said, "One at a time, please." But they read in their funny little voices, and that's his moment. He's becoming a man at 13. And I think that's a lot to do with the confidence of many Jewish boys. So, have you enjoyed tonight? I wanted to give you more than pictures, but I wanted to give you the smells, because I can tell you some of the old city really smells, but I couldn't do that. But I'll give you sounds. Someone once wrote us a letter from the garden tomb, and she described all the sounds that you hear. At half an hour before sunset, a siren goes over the whole city, warning you've got half an hour till Shabbat starts. If it's a special Sabbath, you'll hear music, Feast of Tabernacles, and you'll hear that. And the sound of the Arabs calling from their mosques. One of them was 100 meters from our window, and he went 5 times a day. The sound of Christian bells, the sound of Christian songs and music, the new tram, like the old-fashioned tram. You remember they used to have a hammer that hit the wheel? They still use that now in the brand new ones. Lovely. And you'll hear St. Anne's Church with its wonderful acoustics, and you'll see us wading and hear the water as we wade through. So this is just to give you a sound of what it's like to live in Jerusalem.
كرتونتين ماس وسنيكرز ب10، 5 واحد شوكولاتة ب10، كيس الحلو ب10.